My daughter and her husband threw every piece of my life onto the driveway while I was away visiting an old friend in Sudbury. When I got home, I found 43 years of living piled next to the recycling bins like something waiting for garbage day. My daughter stood at the door with her arms crossed and told me the house wasn't mine anymore. I smiled, pulled out my phone, and made a single call. 14 days later, they were driving to every address they could find for me, leaving 41 missed calls begging me to pick up. They thought they'd finally gotten rid of the inconvenient old man. They had no idea what they'd actually done. I'd been up in Sudbury for a long weekend, visiting my friend Gordon. Wait, no, I need to back up. That name's already been used. My friend Reg Calloway. We'd known each other since the mill, back when both of us had hair and neither of us had bad knees. He'd moved north after his wife passed, said the quiet helped. I understood that kind of quiet now more than I ever wanted to. I'd been up there 4 days, fishing off his dock and eating badly cooked wally and not thinking about much of anything. That's what the drive north does for you. Once you clear Barrie and the highway opens up and the rock cuts start, you can breathe again. I left Toronto on a Thursday morning with a cooler and a change of clothes, and the kind of lightness you only feel when you're heading somewhere nobody needs anything from you. I should have known something was wrong when my son-in-law didn't answer my text, asking if they needed anything from the road. He always answered. Even passive-aggressively, he always answered. The 400 brought me back into the city on Sunday afternoon. October in Ontario, that particular gray that settles in around Thanksgiving and doesn't lift until April. I drove through my old neighborhood, the one I'd lived in for 22 years. The house my late wife Sandra had chosen because of the maple in the front yard. She said it would look beautiful in October. She was right about that. She was right about that. She was right about most things. I turned onto the street and saw it before I even reached the driveway. Boxes, garbage bags, a plastic bin on its side, my reading chair sitting on the lawn at an angle, like someone had carried it out and just let go. I sat in the truck with the engine running for a long moment. The maple was doing exactly what Sandra had promised, red and gold and absolutely indifferent to what was happening underneath it. I turned the engine off. The boxes were mine. I could see that from the truck. The one on top had Keechin written on it in black marker, my handwriting, from the last time I'd moved. 11 years ago. Sandra had labeled the boxes. I had carried them. Now they were both outside in the October damp, the cardboard already starting to go soft at the corners. I got out slowly. My knees have been bad since the fall I took at the plant in 2018, and cold days make them worse. I walked up the driveway and started looking through what had been put out. My tools were in a laundry basket, just tossed in loose. The socket set my father had given me when I bought my first car. The level I'd used to hang every picture in that house. Sandra's Christmas ornaments were in a garbage bag, the ones her mother had brought from Portugal, the ones we'd unwrapped every December 1st since 1987. I could feel one of them crack when I pressed the bag gently from the outside. I didn't open it. I wasn't ready to know. The photo was in a box near the door. Our wedding photo, the one that had been on the mantel for 22 years. The frame had hit something on the way out. The glass was gone completely. Sandra's face was exposed to the October air, already damp at one corner. I picked it up with both hands and stood there holding it like I didn't know what to do next. I knew what to do next. I walked to the front door and tried my key. The lock had been changed. I tried twice, stood there looking at the key like it had done something wrong. Same key I'd cut at the Canadian Tire on Eglinton in 2001. Different lock now. I called my daughter. Voicemail. I called my son-in-law. Voicemail. I went and knocked on my neighbor Maureen's door. She'd lived next door for 16 years. We exchanged tomatoes from the garden every August. Her car was in the driveway. I could hear the television. Nobody came to the door. The message was clear enough. I went back to my truck and sat down, placed the wedding photo on the passenger seat, looked at Sandra's face. The damp had already reached her hair. "Well," I said out loud to nobody in particular. "All right then." I waited. The afternoon went gray, then darker gray. A couple of the neighbors drove past. One of them slowed down, looked at the pile on the lawn, looked at me sitting in the truck, and kept driving. I don't blame anyone for staying out of family business. I've done it myself. But sitting there watching people choose not to see you is a particular kind of cold that has nothing to do with October. Around 6 o'clock, their SUV pulled into the driveway. My son-in-law got out of the driver's side. My daughter followed, carrying grocery bags like it was a Tuesday. Like there wasn't a man sitting in a pickup truck watching her in front of a lawn full of his belongings. I got out of the truck. "Dad," my daughter said it like a statement, not a greeting. She didn't put the bags down. "Your things are all there," my son-in-law said. He had the voice he used in meetings. I'd heard it at enough family dinners to recognize it. Calm, organized, already finished with this conversation before it started. "We think it's best if you find your own place. You've got your pension, you've got your savings, you'll be fine." I looked at my daughter. She was studying the top button of her coat. "This is my house," I said. "I've lived here for 22 years. "It's our house now," my son-in-law said. "Legally. You signed it over when you helped us with the mortgage. You said yourself it was a gift." That word, gift. I had a memory of sitting at the kitchen table, the same kitchen table that was probably now in a different configuration because my daughter had been talking about an open-concept renovation since February. Sandra had been gone 3 years. My daughter had called me, said they were having trouble qualifying for the refinance, that the numbers just weren't working, that they were worried about the house. I drove over. I signed papers. My daughter had hugged me at the door on the way out and said, "You're the best, Dad. This is our home. You'll always have a place here." Always. She used that word. I remember because I wrote it down later in the small notebook I keep by the bed, the one where I write down things. Sandra would have wanted to remember. "You said I'd always have a place here," I said. My daughter finally looked at me. Her expression wasn't cruel, exactly. It was something worse. It was done. Like she'd already finished grieving something and moved on, and was slightly impatient to have me catch up. "Dad, it's just not working. You're set in your ways, and we have our own family now. We need space." My son-in-law had already started toward the front door. "There's a retirement community in Mississauga that has availability. We can help you look into it." The door opened and closed. My daughter followed him in without looking back. The porch light came on, then went off again. Not a mistake. A signal. I stood on the driveway in the dark for a while. The maple rustled. A car went by on the street with its windows up and its music on. I loaded what I could into the truck. The wedding photo went in first, wrapped in one of my flannel shirts to keep the damp off Sandra's face. The Christmas ornaments, careful with the garbage bag even though I already knew at least one was broken. My tools. My father's socket set. 3 boxes of clothes. The reading chair I left. It was too big, and the truck bed was full. And honestly, it had never been quite right after my son-in-law sat in it wrong back in 2019 and bent something in the mechanism. Some things you let go. I drove to a Comfort Inn, off the 427. The kind of place truckers use, 49 rooms and a parking lot that's half gravel. The night clerk was a young Punjabi guy who was doing his calculus homework behind the desk and barely looked up except to run my card. I asked for a ground floor room because of my knees. He gave me one. I carried in what I needed and left the rest in the truck. The room smelled like the particular cleaning product that all highway motels use, the one that smells like lavender. Try to apologize for something. I put Sandra's photo on the nightstand. Set her mother's jewelry box next to it, the wooden one with the painted blue tiles, the one she'd had since she was 12. I sat on the edge of the bed. Here's what I knew, sitting in that room on that Sunday night. My daughter and my son-in-law thought they understood my situation completely. They knew I had a pension from the plant, plus CPP. They knew I had some savings. They thought they knew the full picture. They didn't know about the letter from my lawyer that was sitting in a locked filing box in the truck. They didn't know what was in it. They'd never bothered to ask about my finances in any detail, because they'd assumed the details weren't interesting, that I was a retired factory worker with a modest life who needed their charity. That assumption was about to cost them something significant. I'm not a complicated man. I worked at the same manufacturing plant for 31 years. I lived in the same house for 22. I drove the same model of truck 3 times in a row because it worked, and I saw no reason to change what works. But Sandra was the one who'd always said that the quiet ones are the ones you need to pay attention to, and she'd been married to me long enough to mean it as a compliment. I slept better than I expected to. Monday morning I was up at 6, which is when I always get up. I drove to a Tim Hortons and had a large dark roast and a plain bagel and sat by the window watching the Gardner traffic and doing the thinking I'd been putting off since the night before. Then I drove to see Michael Adeyemi. Michael had been my lawyer for 19 years. He'd handled Sandra's estate. He knew everything there was to know about my finances, which is to say he knew considerably more than my daughter and son-in-law had ever bothered to find out. I laid out what had happened. Michael listened without interrupting, which is what I paid him for. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Walk me through what you signed," he said, "when you helped them with the mortgage." I described it as best I could. I'd signed as a co-signer. I'd been on the original mortgage to help them qualify. I hadn't signed over any ownership. I had never signed over any ownership. My name was still on the deed as co-owner, which my son-in-law had apparently forgotten, or hoped I had forgotten, or perhaps had never fully understood in the first place because he'd let his own lawyer do the reading and hadn't paid close enough attention. Michael pulled up the land registry records on his computer. "You're still a registered owner," he said. 50%. There it was. They had changed the locks on a house they owned 50% of. They had thrown my belongings out of a house I co-owned. They had told me to find a retirement community in Mississauga, as though they had the authority to make that recommendation, which legally they did not, because I was not their tenant. I was their co-owner. "What are my options?" I asked. Michael outlined them in the organized way he has, like a man who spent his career watching families destroy themselves and had developed a professional serenity about it. I could demand access immediately, legally. I could begin partition proceedings to force a sale. Given the Toronto real estate market and the neighborhood, the house had appreciated substantially since the original purchase. My 50% of current market value was, Michael confirmed after checking the recent comparable sales, somewhere in the neighborhood of $460,000. $460,000. My daughter had been doing me a favor by managing things. That was the dynamic in the house. I was the old man who was good for help with bills and not much else. "I'd like to move forward with forcing a sale," I said, "and I'd like it done correctly and completely." Michael nodded like this was not even slightly the most difficult conversation he'd had that week. He made some calls while I sat there. A real estate lawyer colleague, a property appraiser who could move quickly. Within an hour, the formal process had begun. A letter would go to my daughter and son-in-law by end of day, from Michael's firm, on letterhead, outlining my legal rights as a co-owner and initiating the partition process. I walked out of Michael's office into a cold Monday morning in October and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing the air that smelled like fallen leaves and someone nearby burning wood in a fireplace, which you're technically not supposed to do in the city. But people do anyway. I felt like myself for the first time in a long time. I called Reg Calloway from the parking lot. "How'd it go when you got back?" he asked. "About as bad as it could go," I said. "I'll be in touch." Then I drove to a rental office on Bloor Street and arranged a furnished one-bedroom apartment, month to month, on the third floor, with a view of a parking lot and a small park where people walk their dogs in the morning. The super was a retired man from Calabria named Enzo, who showed me the apartment and pointed out where the recycling went and told me the radiators were noisy but reliable. I told him I appreciated reliability. I moved in that afternoon. There wasn't much to bring in. A pickup truck worth of a life doesn't take long to unpack. Sandra's photo went on the dresser, the jewelry box beside it, the tools in the closet, the boxes of clothes in the corner. I ordered a pizza from a place down the street and ate it sitting on the floor because I didn't have furniture yet, watching the news on my phone, feeling the radiator tick on and off. It was not an unhappy evening. Tuesday, Michael sent the letter. By Tuesday afternoon, my daughter had called 11 times. I didn't answer. By Wednesday, my son-in-law had called 8 more times. He'd also sent 3 emails, 2 of which were civil and 1 of which was not. I saved them all and forwarded them to Michael. By Thursday, my daughter had found Reg's number somehow, through who knows what directory or mutual acquaintance, and called him asking if he knew where I was. Reg called me, slightly amused. "Your daughter is looking for you," he said. "I know," I said. "Want me to tell her anything?" "Tell her Michael Adeyemi's number. She already has it." By the end of the first week, they'd apparently driven to my old bowling club on Kipling, called the plant to ask if any retired workers knew my whereabouts, and contacted Sandra's sister in Brampton, who called me in a state of considerable distress, wanting to know what on earth was happening. I explained it to Sandra's sister calmly and completely. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in the voice she used when she was very certain about something, "Sandra always worried about that one." I knew which one she meant. She didn't have to say. The voicemails progressed the way Michael had predicted they would. First confused, then angry, then frightened. My daughter's voice changed by the 3rd day, the professional management tone she'd been using, dissolving into something I recognized from when she was younger and had done something she knew was wrong and was trying to figure out how to navigate backward from it. "Dad, we need to talk about this. This isn't what we meant. Call me back, please." And later, "Dad, we didn't understand about the deed. We honestly didn't know. Please, just let us explain." And later still, on a Sunday when I was making soup in my apartment kitchen and watching the dog walkers in the park below, "Dad, please, this is our home. We have nowhere else to go. Please just call me back." I finished my soup. I did not call back. What I did do was answer when Michael called, which he did regularly with professional updates. The appraisal had come in at $920,000. The formal partition process was underway. My daughter and son-in-law had retained their own lawyer, which Michael had anticipated. There would be some negotiation, some delay, but the legal position was unambiguous. The morning the appraisal confirmed the number, I sat with my coffee and thought about the retirement community in Mississauga they'd suggested. Affordable units for seniors. My son-in-law had said it with the confidence of a man disposing of a problem. I tried to picture Sandra's reaction to that conversation and found I couldn't, because Sandra would have stopped the whole thing well before it reached the driveway on a Sunday afternoon in October. Sandra had always been better at seeing people clearly than I was. 6 weeks after they'd changed the locks on me, I drove back to the old neighborhood. Not to the house, just to the street. I parked at the end and sat there for a few minutes. The maple had dropped most of its leaves by then. The lawn was covered in them, gold and brown, and from the look of things, nobody had raked in a while. My son-in-law had never had much patience for yard work. That had always been mine. I drove away. The sale completed on a Thursday in late November. The buyers were a couple from Scarborough with 2 young kids and a dog that I heard barking when they came to the final walkthrough. Michael handled everything. The proceeds were divided per the ownership percentages cleanly, according to the law. My daughter called the morning of the closing. I answered this time. She was crying before she said anything. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know how it got to this. We were wrong. We were wrong about everything." I let her finish. Outside my apartment window, the first real snow of the season was coming down, the wet, heavy kind that sticks to everything. "Yes," I said, "you were. Can we? Is there any way we can start over? Can I come and see you?" I thought about Sandra's photo on my dresser. I thought about the Christmas ornament I'd finally opened the bag to check, her mother's favorite, the little painted one with the Portuguese fishing boat cracked clean across the middle, the two halves still holding their shape but separated by a line that wasn't there before. "Not right now," I said. "Maybe in the spring." She cried a little more. I didn't try to talk her out of it. After we hung up, I stood at the window and watched the snow cover the parking lot below, covering the painted lines in the old asphalt and making everything temporarily the same, clean white. A man came out of the building walking a large gray dog. The dog immediately delighted with the snow, spinning around and pushing its nose into the accumulation like it had forgotten this existed and was discovering it fresh. I watched them until they went around the corner and out of sight. Then I went and made another cup of coffee, sat at the table by the window, and started writing down what I was going to do next. Not for anyone else, just for myself. Because I was 67 years old and I had a settlement in the bank and time that belonged to no one but me, and somewhere in the drawer was a notebook with Sandra's handwriting in it, and I had been meaning for a long time to finish what she'd started in it. This time, nobody was going to take that from me. The morning after the sale closed, I sat by the window in my apartment on Bloor and watched the snow come down, and I thought about something Sandra used to say. She'd say that people show you who they are, slowly, one small choice at a time, and that the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to believe them. I hadn't believed them, not for years. I'd watched my daughter's patience with me thin out like ice in March, watched my son-in-law look through me at dinner tables and family gatherings, and I'd told myself it was stress, it was busy seasons, it was the ordinary friction of people living close together. I made excuses the way you do when the truth is too heavy to pick up all at once. But here's what I've come to understand. Sitting in a quiet apartment that's mine and only mine, the choices my daughter and her husband made didn't start on that Sunday afternoon in October. They started years earlier, in small moments where they chose convenience over decency. Every time they accepted what I gave without saying thank you. Every time they made a decision about the house as though my name wasn't on the deed. Every time they let me eat alone in my own home so they could have their space. Those were choices, and choices have weight. They accumulate. By the time they changed the locks, they'd already been building toward it for a long time, and the locks were just the moment it became impossible to ignore. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because I think it matters to understand the difference between a single bad act and a pattern. A single bad act you can forgive and move past. A pattern is what someone has decided to be. And once you see the pattern clearly, pretending you don't is its own kind of dishonesty. What I had to do, once I was sitting in that motel room with Sandra's photo on the nightstand and my tools in the closet, was think clearly instead of emotionally. That took more discipline than it sounds. I was 67 years old and I'd just been thrown out of the house where I'd lived for 22 years. The easy thing would have been to drive back and beg, or to collapse into self-pity and wait for someone to rescue me. Instead, I got up at 6 in the morning, drove to Tim Hortons, and made a list. I called my lawyer. I did the next thing, and the next thing after that. That steadiness, that refusal to let hurt override judgment, that's the thing that made everything else possible. Not cleverness, not money, not luck. Just the willingness to keep thinking when every instinct wanted me to stop. And underneath all of that was something quieter, a kind of self-respect that I think I'd let erode year by year in that house. Sandra's notebook is on my table now, the one with her handwriting in it. She'd written down things she wanted to remember. Recipes, lines from books she loved, names of plants she was going to learn. She never finished it. I've started adding to it, not because it brings her back, but because it's the right thing to do with what she left behind. That's what I kept coming back to, through all of it. What is the right thing? Not the easiest thing, not the thing that makes the pain go away fastest. The right thing. It's a plain, old-fashioned standard, and it doesn't always look impressive, but it holds. It held for me when nothing else did. My daughter and her might come in the spring. I left that door open and I meant it. But if she comes, she'll come to a man who knows what his house is worth. In every sense of that,